Good evening and welcome to Election Night 2024. We're happy to have you along with us for what will be the conclusion to a monumental election season. Now, a lot has happened since you were with us 2 years ago, and especially in the months leading up to tonight. We plan to give you insight on multiple aspects of the election process, both locally and nationally. But first, let's get into tonight's news. At the top of the ticket, we have a closely watched presidential race with Donald Trump leading 6.7 million votes to 5.4 million votes. And now we know it's early. And for the Kentucky voters who are deciding on key amendments, which are Amendment 1, and it explicitly says that it prohibits non-citizens from voting in state and local elections. And you can see the totals there with yes leading, and Amendment 2, which would allow for public funding for non-public schools. And you can see no leading there with 64%. Now, in the race for U.S. Congress, Republican Andy Barr is facing off Democrat Randy Cravens. And you can see that Barr is leading with 56%. Now, over in the race for the state representative 45th district, Thomas Jefferson is leading Adam Moore with 52% over 48%. And in the race for the state representative 56th district, Daniel A. Pfister is leading Chantel Bingham 54 to 46%. And finally, for the Wilmore City Council election, we don't really have those statistics yet, but we will let you know when we get to them. And you can see that is including all of those candidates listed for you right there. Now, voters across the country have been exploring more options than ever before to cast their ballots. Reporter Savasti Levignati had the opportunity to talk with Asbury students about early voting and absentee ballots.
Our generation is such a busy generation. We really pack our schedules, but I think it's so important that we find time in our schedule to stop and vote.
Amidst the busyness of everyday life, voters across the country have been exploring more options than ever before to cast their ballots.
It's important to have the right to vote because, it just decides so many things in our country.
Applying for early voting or requesting an absentee ballot has become a vital tool, offering a convenient way for citizens, particularly university students, to participate in this democratic process. Voters can apply online, by mail, or in person at election offices. Emma Bell, a senior at Asbury University, has opted for early voting.
So personally, with voting for me, it's a little more difficult because I live in Georgia. And so I have to vote in Georgia, which means early voting works really well for me because I can kind of find a time within the period to go to Georgia and go into wherever is closest to my house there.
Early voting, as well as absentee ballot, are designed to make voting more accessible, especially for those facing time or logistical constraints.
For me, it's like I'm still a part of this country regardless of whether I'm in my state or not when elections is happening.
Applications for both processes must be submitted within a specific period before Election Day, with deadlines varying by state or county. Deb Shortleaf decided to apply for an absentee ballot and completed the process to ensure her vote would be counted before Election Day.
So I live in Ohio. That's where my mailing address is. But because I go to school in Kentucky, I have to apply for an absentee ballot. And if it's approved, then I can send it through, and that way my vote still counts.
In Wilmore, Savasti Levignati.
Now that you've seen what early voting looks like, let's get into some of the statistics surrounding early voting with Ella Case.
Thanks, Asa. Almost 800,000 Kentuckians voted either early or absentee this election. About 53% of those early voters were Republicans and some 40% were Democrats. Kentucky's early voting window was open from October 31st through November 2nd. Nationally, about 78 million votes were cast prior to today, and according to NBC News, 41% of those who voted early were Democrats, to Republicans 39%. The early voting numbers were actually down this year compared to 4 years ago when 110 million early ballots were cast. Of course, a significant portion of voters who cast ballots via mail and absentee in 2020 could be attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic. Many analysts believe that early voting in 2020 was to the benefit of Democrats. We might not know for a while which party gained or lost due to this year's early voting totals. Back to you, Asa.
Thank you, Ella. Coming up, reporter Anna Hungsinger gets campus perspectives on politics, and we'll be right back after a short commercial break. It can be hard to truly tell how people feel about politics based on polls and numbers. We sent reporter Anna Hungsinger to ask the Asbury community and see how people really feel about this year's election.
Hi guys, my name is Anna Hungsinger and I'm coming to you live on Asbury's campus, and today we're going to go around and we're going to ask people political questions, and it should be pretty interesting. We're getting perspectives from professors, from students, and from anybody who honestly will give us their attention. So are you planning to vote in this upcoming election?
I am. I actually have already sent in my ballot.
Okay, yeah. That's good progress. We love to hear that.
I have made an extensive effort to register to vote, and I will be voting next Tuesday, absolutely.
Process. Mail-in ballot? Have you already done that? You have not done that. Perfect.
I'm not an American citizen, so I can't vote.
Do you think that young people's voices are being heard in this specific election?
I think it's being heard more than any other election in the past, just because of how big Gen Z and millennials have become.
I think that especially the different political parties are realizing that there's this entire wave of new young voters who actually do care.
So on a scale of 1 to 10,
yes.
1 being that you don't care at all, 10 being that you care the most,
yes.
Where do you fall on that scale about this upcoming election?
I would say a solid 6.
I'm sitting at a solid 5 or 6, I think.
Okay.
Though I'm from another part of the world, it will definitely have an impact. So in saying all of that, I would say, probably 8 out of 10 in terms of...
In probably 15 or so years, I'm not going to think about this very much.
Okay.
Like right this moment that I'm in right now, and depending on whoever wins, is not going to be as important to me.
What causes you not to care?
I don't know. I just don't.
Okay.
I think, I have no reason not to care. I just don't. I'll probably vote just because I'm able to.
Okay, guys, if you don't want to be like the last guy, then you need to continue to watch and stay tuned for the rest of the night. My name is Anna Hungsinger. Good to see you.
On the ballot in Kentucky was Amendment 2, which would allow for public funding of non-public schools. Reporter Christina Smith has more from Wilmore Crossing Academy.
Thank you, Asa. We are here at Wilmore Crossing Academy to bring to you the latest information on this election. Kentucky citizens have been voting all day today for the general election on new and adjusted amendments. One main topic of interest Kentucky citizens have been voting for on today's ballot is Amendment 2. Amendment 2 proposes the question of if Kentucky tax dollars should be spent on private and charter schools. In 2022, this amendment was proposed and struck down by Kentucky Supreme Court, but this past March, it was approved to move to the ballot. I got to interview students and citizens here in Wilmore to get their thoughts on Amendment 2. Let's take a look. The state of Kentucky is in a debate over the upcoming ballot, which will ask voters to vote for or against the possible Amendment 2.
So, from my understanding, it's basically the first step to opening the Kentucky schools open to a constitutional change so that state and legislators could have more say in the public education.
The question at hand for voters and Kentucky residents is this: should public tax dollars be used to fund private schools?
I think we should vote yes. I think in a capitalist society, the money goes where the value is. And so I think that if people aren't finding value in the public school system, we shouldn't keep sending money there.
I'm a little worried about giving the state government just license to begin spending money without affirming the ways in which they're spending it. So there's some concerns I have with this bill.
The bill reads, the General Assembly may provide financial support for the education of students outside the system of common schools.
As a music educator, my job is to teach young kids about music, obviously. So when things like that happen, one of the first things that they do is budget cuts. So they'll cut different programs or different resources that they've had, and one of the first things that they typically cut is arts, so that would be music. So should this bill pass, my job could eventually easily be in jeopardy.
Parents, activists, and civilians of Kentucky are divided by two sides of logic. One side actively fighting against the amendment, campaigning with Vote No for Amendment 2, as the other is fighting for the amendment to pass.
Kentucky at the moment is 44th in the nation as far as public education quality. So introducing this bill is only going to make those statistics worse, in my opinion. I think if you want to improve education as a whole, rather than introducing a bill that's going to make life harder for public schools, I'd rather there be a bill that's introduced that will help to secure that those spaces are places that people want to send their kids anyway.
Although the ballot is written, Kentucky still does not know what the future policies may look like. Lawmakers in the General Assembly will begin to create and navigate the policy if the bill is approved. 12 states, including Indiana, California, Florida, and more, all have at least one universal private school choice program. It is now up to Kentucky voters to see if Kentucky will be the 13th state to initiate private school choice. Kentucky polls are now closed, and results will roll out soon. Well, that's all I have for you this evening. Back to you.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you for staying with us. We'll have more election night coverage right after this. The Justice Department sent election monitors to 86 counties in 27 states on Tuesday to ensure the integrity of the general election. That's 49% more monitors since 2020 and the most in 2 decades. The announcement comes amid growing concerns of improper partisan influence and potential voter suppression at election sites. All 7 of the contested swing states are on the Justice Department's list, along with a mix of dominantly red and blue states. Officials in some red states are pushing back. The Secretaries of State in Florida and Missouri said federal monitors will not be allowed to access voting locations in their states. Since the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Justice Department has dispatched government officials to voting sites to make sure vulnerable populations have access and to prevent unlawful partisan interference. It's already a federal crime for non-citizens to vote in national elections, so should Kentucky's constitution be changed to read that non-citizens should not be allowed to vote in state elections? If approved, Amendment 1 would settle things by explicitly saying that non-citizens are prohibited from voting in state and local elections. Alex Deacon is at the Jessamine County Courthouse with more.
Thanks, Asa. I'm currently here at the Jessamine County Courthouse where citizens were counting votes earlier. Kentucky voters saw 2 amendments on the ballot today, with the first one being a citizenship requirement measure. The idea behind this amendment is to close the loophole on non-citizens being eligible to vote in Kentucky. Amendment 1 requires a majority of votes to pass, and if it does, Kentucky's constitution will be changed to state that no person who is not a U.S. citizen shall be allowed to vote in Kentucky elections. This applies to all elections, even local ones such as school board. I sat down with a few people, different ages and backgrounds, to get their input on this amendment, what it means to them, and how they think it would affect Kentucky voting.
Kentucky voters saw 2 amendments on the ballot this election. The first amendment is a citizenship requirement measure. Voters got a choice of a yes or no vote, and the amendment requires a majority of votes to pass. If it's approved, Kentucky's constitution will change to say no person who is not a citizen of the United States shall be allowed to vote in Kentucky elections.
Well, I would vote yes to start. The reason I would vote yes is just because, as a citizen of America, I feel like we should be able to vote, but non-citizens of America should not be able to vote because, we are a democracy. Voting is not a gift. It's just something that we all do, and I just would vote yes. And definitely living in Kentucky, I feel like it's a big talk right now. I feel like everyone that I've pretty much talked to is agreeing with me and voting yes. I feel like the people who vote no would be people who definitely are not from here. I feel like that's what the main thing.
There is some discrepancy on whether this amendment is actually necessary. State election officials have stated that there is no evidence of non-citizens voting in Kentucky, but supporters of the amendment worry that non-citizens may be voting in local races like school board elections.
I'm a military man. I'm a veteran. So I've had my experiences of politics. If they want to change this amendment, before they do, they need to run the scenarios of what it's going to do. The U.S. Constitution says that if you're not a U.S. born citizen, you are not allowed to vote in any types of election whatsoever. If you are a naturalized citizen, which is 7 years, and you have your document, then you are allowed to vote.
Well, about the First Amendment, for example, for me that I'm not from here, I think the government have to be very specific of what kind of people can vote. I'm from Panama. Yeah, I've been here for almost 6 years. Personally, for me, I don't mind it too much because I can vote in my country. So that's the one that I care about the most. For example, we just had some elections a couple months ago, and I went back and I voted, and that was fine. But I know I wasn't born here, and that's something I respect. So, but it will be different for people that have like a lot of years living here. That's why I think they should be more specific about what kind of people can vote or who shouldn't vote.
Asa, the question most debated is whether Amendment 1 is actually necessary. Opponents say that non-citizen voting isn't an issue in Kentucky, therefore the amendment is irrelevant. But supporters argue that this is a long overdue safeguard. As of right now, we don't have any updates on whether or not Amendment 1 will pass, but we should know more soon. Back to you.
Thanks, Alex. In order to further understand the weight of constitutional amendments 1 and 2, let's go back to analyst Ella Case, who is still in the studio with us.
Thank you, Asa. Amendments 1 and 2 would change the state constitution. In short, the First Amendment says that every citizen over the age of 18 who is a resident of a state for 1 year and in the county 6 months shall be a voter in said precinct and not elsewhere. No person that is not a citizen of the United States will be able to vote in the state. The Second Amendment asks if parents should have the choice in educational opportunities for their children. But the discussion has also entailed whether or not to enable the General Assembly to provide financial support from the education costs of students in kindergarten through 12th grade who are outside the public school system. Many Republicans, such as Kentucky United States Senator Rand Paul, have endorsed the bill, while many Democrats, such as Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, have opposed it. Over $16.7 million has gone into groups opposing or supporting the amendment. The biggest funder for pro-Amendment 2 advertising is Protect Freedom PAC, which kicked in $4.4 million, while the largest funder for the opposing side has been the National Education Association, which donated over $5.7 million. Both amendments have been hotly contested for several months. Back to you, Asa.
Another member of our team, Collegian Executive Editor Katie McCracken, will talk with two panelists to discuss election issues and topics after the break.